Hi everyone, I just want to cover an overview of how each case in RCA is marked, but more importantly what this video is really about is the changes from November onwards in terms of mandatory cases and what happens if you miss a mandatory case or if you breach any of the other regulations that are in the RCA handbook and how that will be sanctioned in terms of losing marks, which ultimately could lead someone to fail. Okay, so every case in RCA is marked by two different examiners and they're marked in three domains. So you get a grade for data gathering, that's history and examination, a grade for management, that's actually diagnosis and management, and a grade for interpersonal skills, so communication and interpersonal skills. Okay, so the grades are clear pass, which is 3 marks, pass, which is 2 marks, fail, which is 1 mark, clear fail, which is 0 marks. So the maximum score from one examiner is 9. Clear pass, clear pass, clear pass is 9 marks. But because each case is marked by 2 examiners, the maximum score is actually 18 and the minimum is 0. Okay, now what happens if you either miss any of the mandatory cases or if you breach any of the regulations about recordings? Let's talk about that. One of the big things that's happened is now there's a set of cases which are mandatory. Okay, now I've already covered that in a previous video, but essentially you've got to make sure you've got a child case, you've got to have someone who's older, you've got to have a mental health, you've got to have certain clinical conditions, and at least 2 cases that require clinical examination. Okay, now what happens if you miss a mandatory case or if you also do some of the things that are not permitted in the regulations? A lot of people don't read the detailed regulations, a big handbook from the Royal College. I do recommend you go through it in some detail. I just want to go through those and I'll just talk you through this slide, which is from our RCA masterclass where we covered this. Okay, so the first is if you mislabel any of the criteria. Okay, I'll give you an example. Let's say someone submitted a case as a mental health case, but actually this was not a mental health case. It was someone who happened to have depression, but had come today to talk about acne, and acne was what this case was about. The fact that they happened to have a history of depression was incidental. Their mood hadn't been particularly affected by the acne. They hadn't come to talk about their mood. Do you see, this was not a mental health case. It's someone who just happened to have depression, but that was actually incidental to the case. It wasn't the main focus of that case. So if someone labeled that as their mental health case and they didn't have another case that actually mental health was the main issue for that case, that would be treated the same as if you missed out a case completely. So you'd get 0 marks, okay, for that case. So you're losing 18 marks here. Imagine someone had a single missed case. So, let's say you just didn't have any children. You didn't have a child health case. Remember, one of the mandatory cases is that you've got to have at least one case that's someone who's under 16. Okay, again, you'd be awarded 0 marks for a case. Okay, are you going to lose 18 marks? All right. If you have 2 or more of the mandatory cases missing, you automatically fail. You would not get a refund. You would need to apply for another sitting and start recording again. Okay. If you submit a case where the rule on recording intimate examinations is breached, so remember that if you have any examinations that are on video, it needs to be things that would not be intimate. So for example, you're examining someone's hands, that can be fine. You could do that on the video. But if you need to examine anything that would normally be covered by a swimsuit, if they need to take their top off or they need to take their trousers down, you should do that off camera, i.e. you're not recording that. You should still keep the recording going and they will pick up the sound, but you should do that with either cover the video itself or do it behind curtains so that the patient's dignity is maintained. Let's say someone actually had a chest examination on the video. You're going to get 0 marks for that case. Okay. Finally, if you submit any case where you breach the rule on continuous recording, remember recordings cannot be edited in any way. So let's say they edited out a bit in the middle because maybe they had recorded an examination, for example. But the fact that the recording is now not continuous, that would also be treated as a 0 marks for that case. You're going to lose 18 marks. So it's really, really important that you don't have any of these, because anyone losing 18 marks from any case, there's a really good chance you're going to fail. That's a huge difference to your total score. All right. And so please make sure, number 1, you have all of the mandatory cases before you submit. Number 2, you've labeled everything correctly. and that you don't have any cases where there's any intimate examination on the tape, and that you don't edit your videos, you don't edit out bits in the middle. That's absolutely not allowed. Okay, so I hope that's helpful, just to give you an idea of how is the exam marked, but how might the new sanctions and the new changes in the marking impact someone's chances of passing. Don't do any of these things, because it will really increase your chance that you fail the exam. Okay, so make sure that you make a start early, because another big change is that now you can submit recordings made within 6 months of the results date of your submission. So essentially, if you're sitting the exam in January, February, March, you should already be recording now. All right. If you're going to be submitting in May, it's too early. The recordings you do now, you couldn't submit. That's because the results won't come out until June. And it's not 6 months from the day you submit. It's 6 months from the results date is the earliest that you can submit recordings from. Okay. So I hope that's helpful. If you do want any support, you might find our RCA masterclass. So this slide is taken from our RCA masterclass. I'll put a link into the recording for that. That covers all of the key changes, what cases do you need to submit, how to get good quality recordings, how to structure your consultation, what are the sanctions if you miss cases, how do examiners mark cases. We cover that in a lot more detail, but there's also 6 interactive cases where you'll see, we've gone through cases, so you can see what are some of the kinds of cases that you should try to submit, as well as how the degree of challenge can impact your marks. I hope that's been helpful. I hope to see some of you soon. Keep pushing, keep going, prepare, and you will succeed. Thank you very much.